The orphan was chained to the post until the alpha vampire broke the chains. Her name was Lyra, an orphan who had survived the cruelty of life by keeping her spirit quiet, like a candle fighting against the storm. Her arms ached from the cold iron biting into her wrists, and her legs trembled, not just from the weight of the chains, but from the fear of what was coming. The villagers had gathered at a safe distance, some with curiosity, some with pity. No one dared step closer. Her punishment had been made public, a warning to all who dared defy the rigid order of the vampire lords who ruled the kingdom. Lyra's chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. Her hair clung to her pale face, drenched by the storm. She had been blamed for stealing a loaf of bread from the market. In truth, she had only tried to feed a starving child she had seen huddled under the wooden bridge. But in this land, small acts of kindness could be twisted into crimes, especially when the punishers were vampires. Her eyes scanned the crowd. A few familiar faces appeared, strangers with hard eyes softened by pity. A little boy hiding behind his mother's skirts clutched a piece of stale bread, silently sharing it with her in thought. Lyra's lips curved in a faint smile, but the chains rattled as the wind swirled around her. She swallowed hard and focused on the storm, imagining herself as the wind, free, wild, untamed. The air grew heavier as the villagers shifted uneasily. Whispers spread like fire through dry grass. The alpha vampire is coming. The ground trembled slightly beneath her as a shadow fell over the square. Dark and immense, Kale approached, moving with a grace that was almost unreal. His eyes were like molten silver in the darkness, sharp and piercing, yet holding something that could not be named, something human, buried beneath centuries of solitude. Lyra straightened her back as best she could. Fear gnawed at her, but curiosity pricked like a hidden thorn. She had lived her whole life in fear of the vampire lords, yet here he was, the Alpha himself, standing just beyond the chains that bound her. Kale's gaze swept over the crowd and they fell silent. Even the storm seemed to pause, as if nature itself dared not interrupt this moment. When his eyes met Lyra's, a strange tension filled the air. It was as if the world had narrowed to just the two of them. "You," Kale's voice rang like velvet wrapped in steel. "Why are you chained here, human?" Her chest tightened, not from fear alone, but from the weight of centuries-old injustice that clung to this place like fog. Kale moved closer, the rain sliding down his dark coat like liquid shadows. He stopped in front of her, and for a moment, Lyra could see the sharp angles of his face softened by curiosity. He studied her as if he were trying to read a story written in the lines of her face, in the tension of her jaw, in the trembling of her hands. "You are not like the others," he said softly, almost to himself. Then louder so the crowd could hear, "Why are you not afraid?" There was a challenge in his gaze, a test that no one else could offer. She swallowed hard and finally whispered, "Because chains do not bind the heart." Lyra stumbled forward but was caught by his other hand, strong and steady. The villagers gasped. No human had ever survived the Alpha's gaze without trembling. No human had ever felt his touch without fear. And yet here she was, alive and free in a way that seemed impossible. Kale's eyes held hers, searching for something he could not name. "You should be terrified," he said. "And yet you are not. Perhaps too bold." Kale studied her and then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Come with me," he said. "If you are brave enough to face me, you are brave enough to face what awaits in my world." As Kale extended his hand, she took it. His grip was firm, not cruel but commanding, and for the first time in her life she felt something she had never felt: choice. The Alpha led her through the village, the crowd parting in awe and fear. Rumors would spread as they always did, but Lyra did not care. Her chains were gone. Her fate had changed. The journey to Kale's fortress was long and treacherous. Rain turned to fog, fog to darkness, and darkness to a night so deep it seemed alive. Wolves howled in the distance, yet the fortress stood above the cliff like a sentinel of shadow, its towers piercing the stormy sky. Lyra's heart raced. She had never seen anything so grand, so terrifying, and so beautiful at the same time. The gates opened silently as if expecting them. Inside, the halls were lit with pale candlelight that flickered across walls carved with ancient symbols. The air smelled of old stone and a hint of something more, something she could not name. Kale's eyes never left hers. "Here," he said, "is where you will stay. You will be safe here, but understand this. Safety does not mean freedom from trials. You are not merely a guest, Lyra. You are a participant in something far greater than yourself. And now your choices will shape its path." A fire burned in the hearth, its light casting shadows that danced like specters along the walls. The room smelled faintly of herbs and old parchment. "Rest," he said. "You will need strength for what is coming." She did not understand him, yet she felt as though a part of her had always belonged to this dark, lonely being. Outside, the storm continued its relentless assault on the cliffs, lightning splitting the sky and thunder shaking the fortress. Lyra felt small, fragile, yet strangely alive. Chains had been broken, but new challenges waited in the darkness, in the whispers of the wind, in the eyes of the vampire who had chosen her. As she drifted into a fitful sleep, one thought lingered more than any other. She was no longer merely a prisoner of the world. She had been seen, chosen, and perhaps in some way understood. And somewhere deep in the fortress, Kale watched the girl who had dared to meet his gaze without fear. A long-forgotten stir of something human, something vulnerable, stirred in his chest. For the first time in centuries, he felt that perhaps the world had not yet lost all its color, its fire, its unexpected beauty. The rain continued, relentless and silver, washing the world in light and shadow. And in the heart of the fortress, two souls, one bound by fate, one bound by centuries of solitude, were beginning a journey neither could yet fully comprehend. The chains were gone, but the story was only beginning. He shadows and the world would throw at them next. The fortress rose high above the cliffs, dark and silent except for the relentless wind that howled through the towers. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of stone, old parchment, and something else Lyra could not name. A faint sweetness, almost like the memory of fire and blood, distant and haunting. She followed Kale through long, twisting corridors, her wet hair clinging to her face, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, more from anticipation than fear. Kale's eyes flicked to her, sharp and unreadable like moonlight over black water. "There are places you need to see," he said simply. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but carried an edge that warned her not to test him. Lyra noticed the contrast immediately. He was the Alpha, a creature of power and darkness, yet there was something human in his gestures, something carefully hidden under layers of control. She wondered if anyone had ever truly seen the man behind the legend. They entered a hall lit by hundreds of candles. The walls were lined with ancient tapestries depicting battles, kings, and creatures that moved as if alive. Shadows danced across the stone, creating illusions of motion. Lyra's eyes widened. She had never seen anything so beautiful or so terrifying. Kale stopped in the center of the hall and turned to face her. "This fortress is my domain," he said. "Every corner, every shadow, every whisper belongs to me. Yet you are here, and that means something." "I don't understand," she said. "I am just an orphan. Why would you care about me?" It scared her the way her heart responded to him despite her fear. "You should not feel this," she whispered, almost to herself. Kale tilted his head, the faintest shadow of a smile brushing his lips. "Feelings are not always meant to be controlled," he said. "Some are meant to guide you, whether you wish it or not. Danger surrounds us at every turn. The streets of your village, the chains that bound you, they are only the beginning. There are forces that wish to claim you, to use you, and I will not allow that." And yet, strangely, there was comfort in knowing someone as powerful as Kale was willing to protect her. Kale motioned for her to follow him. They walked through another set of corridors until they reached a room filled with books, scrolls, and artifacts that seemed to hum with magic. A large window overlooked the cliffs and the stormy sea beyond, the waves crashing like a wild symphony. "This is where I keep knowledge," Kale said. "Knowledge of the world, of creatures, of curses, and of power. You will learn much here if you are willing." "I don't know if I can," she admitted. Kale's eyes softened just a little. "Perhaps," he said, "but the choice is not yours alone. You are now a part of something larger, Lyra, and the world will demand more from you than you imagine." Lyra learned the rhythms of the place, the echo of Kale's footsteps, the way shadows seemed to bend toward him, the quiet moments when he disappeared and returned with secrets she could never fully guess. She learned to move quietly, to observe, to listen. She felt herself changing, becoming stronger, sharper, more aware. And Kale watched her, always watched. At first, it had been curiosity. Then fascination. Then something deeper, something he did not dare name. There were moments when his gaze lingered too long, when the corner of his mouth twitched as if he were on the verge of speaking truths he had long buried. Lyra began to notice it too, the small gestures, the way he allowed her near his study when no one else could, the subtle nods that encouraged her, the rare, fleeting moments when he let his mask slip. She could feel the tension between them, like a thread stretched too tight, quivering with unspoken words. One evening, the storm raged louder than ever. Thunder shook the fortress walls and lightning illuminated the hall where Kale and Lyra practiced survival exercises, a form of training to defend herself, to prepare for dangers that lurked beyond the fortress. Kale watched her as she moved, noting her strength, her speed, and her determination. "You are improving," he said, "faster than I expected." "Do you always train your prisoners?" she asked, trying to sound bold, though her chest pounded with something she did not understand. Kale's eyes glimmered with something that was almost amusement. "I do not have prisoners," he said. "I have allies, or at least, I hope you will become one." She was no longer a victim. She was no longer chained. She was becoming someone who mattered, someone who could stand beside him, even in the shadow of the storms. Night fell, and the storm outside became a symphony of sound and light. Lyra sat by the window, looking out at the sea, listening to the wind. Kale joined her quietly, standing behind her with hands folded, his eyes scanning the dark horizon. "You are thinking," he said softly, not quite a question. Lyra turned her head slightly. "Always," she said. "I have to. If I don't, I will be lost. Not while I am here." Instead, he leaned closer, his presence overwhelming, the storm outside a distant murmur. "Because you do not fear me in the way others do," he said finally. "Because you see me as I am, not as the stories claim. And because I feel that our fates are linked in ways neither of us yet understands." And yet beneath it all, a spark of something fragile, something human, something hopeful. Hours passed in silence, the storm outside fading to a soft drizzle. Lyra felt exhaustion pull at her, but also a strange sense of belonging she had never known. She was not just surviving anymore. She was learning, she was growing, and she was not alone. As she closed her eyes, a thought lingered. The chains had been broken, but a new kind of bond had begun. One forged not in iron, but in curiosity, power, and the unspoken tension between two souls who were learning to trust each other in a world built of shadows. Kale watched her as she slept, standing by the window with the light of the moon reflecting off his pale skin. His hand twitched slightly, as if he wanted to reach out, to touch, to protect, yet he restrained himself. Centuries of solitude did not vanish overnight, yet the stirrings of something long buried began to awaken, a desire, a need, a connection he had not felt in hundreds of years. Outside, the wind whispered through the fortress towers, carrying the scent of rain and the distant sea. Inside, a new story was beginning, one of power, danger, and a fragile, burning connection that neither Kale nor Lyra could ignore. The orphan who had once been chained to a post was now standing at the edge of a world she had never known. The alpha who had shattered her chains was beginning to realize that she was more than a human to be protected. She was a spark in the darkness, and the darkness had taken notice. And as the night deepened, both of them knew one truth. Their paths were now intertwined, and the journey ahead would test not only their strength but the boundaries of fear, desire, and trust. The chains were gone, but the shadows had only just begun to stir. The days in the fortress had settled into a strange rhythm. Lyra rose with the dim light of dawn, training alongside Kale, learning to move with quiet strength and alertness. Every strike, every dodge, every lesson in endurance and patience became a part of her. She had once been an orphan with no skill, no protection, no place in the world. Now, under Kale's watchful eyes, she was growing sharper, stronger, and more aware of the dangers surrounding them. Kale watched her closely, his silver eyes reflecting the flickering firelight as he circled her in the training hall. She moved with cautious determination, her movements hesitant at first but gaining precision with each repetition. For centuries, he had trained soldiers and followers, creatures who obeyed fear and command. Yet Lyra was different. She did not obey blindly. She questioned, she observed, she learned, and that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. "You hesitate here," Kale said, stopping beside her. "Do not trust your instincts. But you adapt faster than I expected." Words seemed too fragile to describe the swirl of feelings inside her. Fear, respect, awe, and something deeper, something unspoken. Kale looked away, hiding the flicker of emotion that had passed across his face. "Focus on the training," he said firmly. "Emotions will not save you when danger comes. Skill will." She tried to push the strange pull between them aside, focusing on the moves, the strikes, the balance between power and caution. The days passed in this rhythm, but the fortress was not a place of peace. Danger lurked outside its walls. Rival clans of supernatural beings prowled the forests and villages, seeking to extend their power. Kale's position as alpha made him a target, and by association, Lyra was too. One evening, a messenger arrived, a shadow slipping through the gates, soaked from the rain and trembling. He delivered a single message. A rival clan had been spotted near the northern cliffs, planning an attack. Kale read the note, his expression darkening. "Prepare yourself," he said to Lyra. "We leave at first light." Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the jagged cliffs and crashing waves below. Kale and Lyra rode together through the forest, silent but alert. The wind tugged at Lyra's hair, stung her skin, and filled her with the awareness that this world was alive, dangerous, and unpredictable. When they reached the edge of the forest, the rival clan was already there, waiting. Their leader, a towering figure cloaked in shadows, stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with malice. Kale dismounted smoothly, his presence commanding. "You have trespassed," he said. "Leave now or face consequences." Lyra stepped forward instinctively. Fear roared in her chest, but she did not step back. She could see the edge of Kale's concern, the tension in his jaw, and something in her stirred, a courage she did not know she possessed. The battle began suddenly, swift and violent. Kale moved with the speed of a storm, his strikes precise, devastating. Lyra followed, unsure at first, but instinct guided her. She blocked, dodged, and struck when she could, the training paying off. Adrenaline sharpened her senses, and for the first time she felt not like a victim but like a fighter, part of something larger. Kale noticed her growing confidence. "Good," he said briefly, his voice low. "You are learning faster than I anticipated." She stood her ground, using the skills he had taught her. She deflected an attack, surprising even herself. The rival stumbled, and Kale took advantage, striking with a force that sent the shadowed figure sprawling. When the fight was over, Lyra was breathing heavily, hands trembling. Kale looked at her, a mixture of astonishment and something else, something softer, more human. "You protected me," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Lyra shook her head. "I didn't know I could," her words trailed off. She realized that she had discovered a new strength, one she never knew existed. Kale stepped closer, the tension between them almost unbearable. "You are stronger than you know," he said, "and braver. That is why you survived. That is why you are here." Kale tended to his own minor injuries with calm efficiency, but he did not rush to Lyra, allowing her space. Yet she could feel his eyes on her, ever watchful, assessing, protective. "I should have warned you," he said finally, breaking the silence. "The world beyond these walls is not forgiving. Danger is constant. And you are learning that the same strength that protects you can also make you a target." She did not know what to say. She felt it too, the pull between them, something neither fear nor respect could fully define. It was a connection built on trust, danger, and the silent acknowledgement of strength. Days passed and the fortress grew quieter. The battle had passed, but the echoes lingered. Lyra spent her time learning more about Kale, the fortress, and the strange, magical currents that flowed through both. She discovered hidden chambers filled with relics, tomes, and artifacts of power. Each object seemed alive, whispering secrets to her in the silence of the night. Kale allowed her to explore, to touch, to question, yet always watched from the shadows. There were moments when he would speak softly, sharing fragments of the world's history, of curses and battles, of loyalty and betrayal. Lyra listened, absorbing knowledge, understanding more with each story. One evening, as lightning split the sky, Lyra discovered a small chamber that radiated a strange warmth. Inside, she found an ancient mirror, its surface rippling like water. As she looked into it, she did not see her reflection but visions of Kale, his battles, his losses, his solitude. The centuries of pain, of loneliness, of power wielded without companionship. A shiver ran through her. She realized that the Alpha who had shattered her chains was also trapped, by his past, by his curse, by the weight of centuries. She understood in that moment that the bond forming between them was not just about strength or survival. It was about understanding, redemption, and perhaps something neither of them had dared hope for: connection. Kale's voice broke the silence. "I see you have found it," he said softly. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, watching her, his expression unreadable but intent. "It's powerful," Lyra said. "It shows you. You are now part of this world, part of its struggles, and part of my life whether you wish it or not. Understanding is the first step toward survival and toward trust." She had survived chains, storms, and battles, yet this connection, this shared weight of knowledge and emotion, was something far more terrifying and exhilarating. Kale reached out, lightly brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. His fingers were cold, but the gesture was gentle. "You are ready," he said. "Ready for the challenges that lie ahead, for the dangers we cannot yet see, and for the choices that will shape your destiny." And beside her, the alpha vampire was beginning to reveal the man behind the legend. As the storm outside raged and the fortress walls trembled, they stood together, teacher and student, protector and protected, predator and human. The bond forming between them was fragile, new, and terrifying, yet it was undeniable. And deep in her heart, Lyra knew one thing for certain: she was no longer alone. The night ended with the quiet echo of rain, the flicker of firelight, and the unspoken promise of what was to come. Beyond the fortress walls, the world waited, dangerous, dark, and full of secrets. And within its shadows, Lyra and Kale would face trials that would test not only their strength but the fragile thread connecting them. Chains were gone. Fears were faced. And the journey toward destiny, toward redemption, and toward each other had truly begun. The night was deeper than any Lyra had known. The fortress walls groaned as the wind pressed against them, and the distant cliffs seemed alive with shadowed movement. Kale stood at the edge of the highest tower, watching the horizon where the storm clouds had begun to gather again. He had been silent for hours, his mind wrestling with thoughts he had buried for centuries. Lyra approached cautiously. She had learned to sense the patterns in Kale's moods, the subtle shifts that told her when danger or something more personal was near. "Kale," she said softly, "you've been here a long time. What is troubling you?" His silver eyes reflected the lightning from the storm, distant and stormy themselves. "There are forces at work," he said finally, "forces that threaten more than just this fortress, more than just us, and they will test us in ways we cannot yet see." Few humans spoke with such certainty, and fewer still understood the gravity of standing beside an alpha vampire. He wanted to speak, to warn her, to tell her that some darkness could not be faced without cost, but he stopped himself. Words could not protect her. Only strength could. The next morning, the threat became clear. Scouts returned from the northern forests, bringing news that a rival clan had discovered the fortress's location. They had begun assembling forces, creatures of shadow and beast, cunning and relentless. Kale's eyes darkened as he listened, his hands clenching into fists. "You must be ready," he told Lyra. "Not just with skill, but with courage. What comes will test more than your body. It will test your heart." The training halls echoed with the sound of their movements, the strike of fists, the clash of wood against wood, the labored breathing of exertion. Lyra felt her body grow stronger, her mind sharper, her senses attuned to the world around her. And yet, she felt something else growing too, a bond with Kale she could not name. It was in the quiet moments when he corrected her stance, in the rare glimmer of approval in his eyes, in the way he allowed her near him when he let others keep their distance. She did not yet understand it, but a longing had begun to stir inside her. One evening, as the sun sank behind jagged mountains, casting crimson light across the fortress, Kale summoned her to the courtyard. The rain had stopped, leaving the stones slick and shiny. Shadows clung to every corner, shifting with the dying light. "Tonight," he said, "you will face your first real test. The rival clan has sent scouts close to the fortress walls. You will confront them." The reality of danger pressed against her chest like a physical weight. Kale approached and laid a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Do not be afraid. Trust yourself. Trust what you have learned. And trust me." She nodded, swallowing hard, and followed him to the edge of the forest that bordered the fortress. The scouts appeared as shadows in the dim light, moving swiftly and silently. Lyra tensed, muscles ready, mind alert. Kale moved beside her, a silent partner, a predator at her side. They were a team, yet the tension between them was palpable, danger mingled with something unspoken, something charged. The scouts attacked without warning. Lyra moved instinctively, blocking, dodging, and countering as Kale had taught her. Her heart pounded, adrenaline sharpened her senses, and fear transformed into focus. She realized that she was no longer the fragile orphan she had once been. She was a fighter, capable and resolute. Kale struck with lethal precision, his movements a blur of power and control. He never left her side, guiding, correcting, protecting, yet allowing her space to act. There was a rhythm to their movements, a silent understanding forming between them. Every glance, every shift of weight, every coordinated strike deepened the bond they were beginning to share. The fight ended quickly, the scouts retreating into the shadows. Lyra's chest heaved, sweat and rain mingling on her skin. She felt exhilaration, relief, and a strange sense of pride. She had faced danger and survived. She had proven herself. Kale watched her carefully. "You are ready for more," he said softly, though his tone carried weight. "But readiness is not just skill. It is understanding who you are and what you can face without losing yourself. But I do not yet know what it means to face the darkness fully." She had learned to fight, to protect herself, to survive. But there was a darkness beyond the skill of the body, a darkness of heart, of spirit, of trust and connection. And she knew that the trials ahead would challenge not only her strength but her ability to trust Kale completely. Days passed, and Lyra noticed Kale changing as well. The hardness in his gaze softened in private moments. He began to share small pieces of his past, stories of battles, losses, and sacrifices he had made to protect those he cared for. Lyra listened, absorbing every word, feeling the depth of loneliness and responsibility he carried. She realized that Kale was not just a ruler, not just an alpha vampire. He was a man bound by duty, by sorrow, by centuries of isolation. One evening, as lightning split the sky and thunder rolled through the fortress walls, Kale led Lyra to a hidden chamber deep within the fortress. The room was small, lined with mirrors and artifacts that glowed faintly in the dim light. "This is a place few have seen," Kale said. "It holds memories and echoes of those who came before us." It can teach you, guide you, and perhaps reveal truths you are not yet ready to face. She realized that the Alpha who had broken her chains was also bound, trapped by his past, by his curse, by the weight of centuries. And in that moment she understood something profound. Their bond was not just about survival, strength, or training. It was about trust, understanding, and redemption, about two souls learning to navigate the darkness together. Kale's voice broke the silence. "You are ready," he said softly. "Ready to face the trials ahead, ready to confront dangers beyond your imagination, and ready to understand what it truly means to be part of this world." And beside her, Kale was beginning to show the man behind the legend, the man who could care, who could trust, who could connect despite centuries of solitude. The night passed with the storm outside fading into a gentle drizzle. Lyra lay in her chamber, reflecting on the day's lessons, the battle, and the glimpses of Kale's past she had witnessed. She realized that chains, whether of iron or of fear, could be broken. Strength, courage, and understanding were the keys to survival and perhaps to something greater. And Kale, standing silently in the shadows, watched over her, aware that the bond between them was deepening. It was fragile, unspoken, and dangerous, yet undeniable. The Orphan and the Alpha, bound not by chains but by fate, were beginning a journey that would test their hearts, their courage, and their ability to trust each other completely. Beyond the fortress walls, the world remained dangerous, dark, and full of secrets. And within those shadows, Lyra and Kale would face trials that could either destroy them or bind them together more tightly than any chain ever could. The chains were gone, but the heart of darkness was only beginning to reveal itself. The night had settled over the fortress like a heavy, velvet curtain. The storm from days before had passed, leaving the cliffs wet and jagged, the sea roaring below. Lyra stood at the edge of the tower, looking out over the lands that had once seemed so far away, now intimately known through hours of training, struggle, and survival. Kale appeared silently behind her, his presence as steady and commanding as ever. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind tangled Lyra's hair, and the scent of rain and salt filled the air. She felt a deep connection to the fortress, to the land, and to the Alpha who had saved her from chains and fear. "The final trial is upon us," Kale said quietly. "The rival clan has gathered all their forces. They will strike before the dawn. Tonight, everything we have learned, everything we have become, will be tested. And perhaps even surpass it. We have little time. Prepare yourself. You will fight not just with skill, but with heart." The greater challenge was facing fear, doubt, and the unknown together. Kale led her to the battlements overlooking the northern approach. Shadows moved in the distance, figures cloaked in darkness, eyes gleaming with malice. Lyra's heart raced, but she felt steadier than ever. She knew the lessons, the skills, and the truth of who she had become. "Stay close," Kale instructed, his voice low, powerful. "Watch me, move with me, trust yourself." The battle was chaotic, brutal, yet mesmerizing. Lyra felt a strange exhilaration, fear and courage blending into clarity. Every strike, every dodge, every command she gave herself echoed the lessons Kale had taught her. She was no longer the girl chained to a post in a village square. She was a fighter, a protector, a force to be reckoned with. Kale noticed her skill, his respect and admiration growing, though he hid it beneath his calm, commanding presence. For centuries he had seen humans as fragile and fleeting, yet here she stood, holding her ground, matching the darkness with courage and heart. The enemy leader emerged, a towering figure cloaked in shadows. Kale moved to intercept, and Lyra stepped beside him, her hand lightly brushing against his arm. The connection was electric, unspoken but undeniable. In that moment they were not just protector and protected. They were allies, partners, bound by battle and trust. The fight was intense. Lyra used every skill she had learned, every instinct sharpened by hours of training. Kale moved with precision, his strikes powerful, his strategy flawless. Together they pushed the enemy back, their synergy undeniable. As the last of the rival clan fled into the night, Lyra and Kale stood together, breathing heavily, the glow of torches and the first light of dawn casting long shadows across the fortress. Victory was theirs, but it was not just a victory over enemies. It was a triumph over fear, doubt, and the chains of the past. Kale turned to Lyra, his eyes holding a depth of emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. "You fought well," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "Stronger than I could have imagined. Braver than many I have trained. You have earned trust, respect, and perhaps something deeper, though neither of us has yet dared to name it." The distance between them was charged, magnetic, and both of them felt it. He extended a hand, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Lyra," he whispered, "you are no longer the girl I found chained to a post. You are part of this world, part of me, and I." Lyra met his gaze, understanding the weight of what he meant. She reached out, placing her hand over his, the contact simple but electric. "I am here," she said softly, "with you, always. You are mine to protect, as I am yours to trust." In the quiet that followed, the fortress seemed alive with a sense of calm victory. The sun rose over the cliffs, casting light on the wet stones and shimmering waters. Birds returned to the trees, the wind softened, and the fortress, once a place of fear and isolation, felt like home. Kale and Lyra stood together on the battlements, looking out over the lands they had defended, feeling the strength of each other. Chains had been broken, both literal and metaphorical, and a new bond had been forged. One built on trust, courage, and the shared understanding of the darkness they had faced. "Lyra," Kale said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries and the softness of newfound hope, "the world is still full of dangers, but as long as we face them together, I believe we can overcome anything. Because we have learned, we have fought, and we have survived." They had faced the shadows and emerged stronger. And now, standing together, they were ready to face the future, whatever it held, with courage, trust, and the unspoken bond of hearts united. The orphan who had once been chained to a post was no longer afraid. The alpha who had broken those chains was no longer alone. Together, they had discovered strength, trust, and a connection that neither time nor darkness could sever. As the sun climbed higher, painting the fortress and cliffs in golden light, Kale took Lyra's hand, and together they stepped forward, not as master and orphan, not as protector and protected, but as equals, allies, and something far deeper, companions bound by fate, courage, and the unbreakable bond of heart and spirit. The chains of the past had been shattered. The darkness had been faced. And the story of the orphan and the alpha vampire had reached its true beginning. A tale of trust, courage, and love that would endure beyond shadows, storms, and centuries to come.